Now begins the recitation of the Aletheon, the divine avataric self-revelation of His divine presence, Avatar Adi Da Samraj. This is the egoless reality way of divine translation. In all the doctrines of the great tradition of humankind, the separate self, or ego I, is described as the fundamental characteristic of human existence. Throughout the great tradition of humankind, the separate self, or ego I, is presumed to be fundamental to all human experience. Throughout the great tradition of humankind, the separate self, or ego I, is presumed even to be fundamental to the universe. Indeed, throughout the great tradition of humankind, the separate self, or ego I, is presumed even to be fundamental to reality itself. Thus, the entire great tradition of humankind is ego-based. The ego as subjective core, the world as objective circumstance, and the divine as objective other are the three fundamental categories made by ego. In the great tradition of humankind, the separate self, or ego I, is regarded not only as an intrinsic aspect of reality, but also as that which must, through an effort of religious or spiritual practice, be diminished, erased, escaped, or overcome. The effort to diminish, erase, escape, or overcome the separate self, or ego I, is variously reflected in the particular perspective and methods of each of the branches of the great tradition of humankind. In every tradition, there is a fundamental notion that the means for getting rid of egoity is disassociation in one mode or another. Such disassociation is expressed either as a matter of religious practice through various controls of social behavior, or as a matter of spiritual practice through techniques of seclusion and strategic isolation. In other words, every religious and spiritual tradition employs egoic techniques of disassociative introversion, or the internalization of attention. All traditions and paths of the first 6 stages of life are disassociative in their disposition and in their method. The universal presumption of the great tradition of humankind is that, since it is erroneously believed the ego intrinsically and irreducibly exists and is a problem, life must become a perpetual search and struggle to somehow get rid of the ego and its effects. Such is the nature and the essential error and fault and limitation of the seeking idealism that is a defining characteristic of the entire great tradition of humankind. Such ego-based idealism is not the case in the only by me revealed and given, radical, or always at the root, reality way of Adidam, or Adidam Ruchiradam. The reality way of Adidam is not about presuming ego as problem from the beginning and then working out some kind of practice designed to get rid of ego as problem. Thus, the reality way of Adidam is not about the seeking effort of problem-based dissociative introversion, or even any kinds of dissociative and ego-bound and ego-binding methods or techniques. Rather, the reality way of Adidam is about intrinsic egolessness from the beginning. The radical reality way of Adidam is about the intrinsic egolessness of reality itself, and, therefore, the intrinsic egolessness of all apparently arising conditions. The reality way that only I can and do reveal and give is unique in the world. I say to one and to all, egolessness is the nature of reality itself. Therefore, ego is not the beginning of the reality way of Adidam. Reality itself is the beginning of the reality way of Adidam, and therefore, intrinsic egolessness is the context, source, nature, condition, and state of the first awakening of whole bodily devotional recognition response to me. Then that intrinsically egoless and whole bodily demonstrated recognition responsive devotion to me is simply magnified until divine translation. At last, in the perfect context of the only by me revealed and given seventh stage of life, the reality way of Adidam is the self-abiding divine self-recognition of all apparently arising phenomena, until self-abiding divine self-recognition of all and all demonstrates itself as divine translation. Such is the only by me revealed and given transcendental spiritual process of the radical or always at the root reality way of Adidam or Adidam Ruchiradam. Here ends the recitation of the Aletheon, the divine avataric self-revelation of his divine presence, avatar, Adi Da Samraj.